In the heart of Kerala's capital, in a quiet compound called Baines, near Cliff House at Nanthancode, a tragedy unfolded in April 2017 that would shock the state and haunt its courts for years. This is the story of Cadell Jeanson Raja, the man who murdered his family, and the long road to justice. Thiruvananthapuram, a city of palms, backwaters, historic streets, under the shade of everyday life, sometimes the darkest secrets lurk behind closed doors. In April 2017, in a house at 117 Baines compound, Nanthancode, something unimaginable occurred. 4 members of a single family were found dead, in a house half-burnt, their bodies mutilated, charred, hidden. The accused, their own son and nephew. Let us begin by introducing the victims and the accused. Professor A. Raja Thankum, aged approximately 60, a retired college professor, father. Dr. Jean Padma, aged approximately 58, his wife, a physician. Caroline, aged approximately 26, their daughter, a medical graduate. Lalitha, aged approximately 70, maternal aunt, partially visually impaired and dependent. Their home, comfortable, well-maintained, in a respectable neighborhood. The accused, Cadell Jeanson Raja, their son, nephew, housemate. A young man struggling with his own identity, isolation, frustration. Over the years following the crime, the state would argue that Cadell bore deep resentment, cultivated secret fantasies, and took steps to plan and conceal his acts. The defense would raise claims of mental illness, astral projection, and try to argue he was not legally culpable. The court would hear from over 40 witnesses, psychiatric boards, forensic reports, digital footprints. The journey to verdict would stretch over 8 years. This is the story of grief, ambition gone awry, and a justice system grappling with the thin line between mental illness and criminal intent. As the narrative unfolds, we must keep in view some fundamental questions. What drove Cadell to commit such an atrocity against his own family? Was it cold, premeditated murder, or a delusion? How did investigators piece together evidence over years, across psychiatric board assessments, digital forensics, witness testimony, and in the end, what does the verdict tell us about culpability, mental health, family, and society? To understand the tragedy, we must peer into Cadell's life before that fateful April. Cadell was sent abroad multiple times for studies. Early on, he had aspirations, but his academic journey was troubled. He did not complete the engineering course in Australia, returned, later enrolled in other courses but did not establish himself. He felt misunderstood, constrained by the family's expectations. According to prosecution narratives, the friction with his father was long-standing. Conflicts over studies, socialization, freedom. He increasingly retreated into electronics, gaming, isolation. Neighbors would later describe him as socially withdrawn, more present with gadgets than with people. Over time, resentment is alleged to have built up until it metastasized into murder. Some of the most chilling evidence in the trial came not from eyeball witness testimony, but from his own digital footprint. Hours of internet searches, browsing videos about how to slit throats, how to dismember bodies, seeing tutorials, watching violent content, all pointed toward a man preparing, not improvising. He even experimented with dummy figures of his family, conducted dry runs, researched ways to clean up blood, and bought fuel, plastic sheets, cleaning supplies to conceal evidence. But beyond the tangible lies the psychological terrain. During the trial, Cadell claimed that his actions were driven by a belief in astral projection, a paranormal theory that the soul can detach from the body. He asserted that he committed the acts to witness the soul's departing, a cloak of mysticism around murder. The prosecution rejected this as a fabrication, an attempt to mask intent with delusion. The forensic psychiatrists and medical boards scrutinized his mental state. The key question: was there psychiatric illness that deprived him of awareness of his actions, or was he fully cognizant and acting with malice and planning? In sum, the man behind the mask was not a mere monster, but a troubled, complex individual. His resentment, alienation, obsession with violent media, broken relationships, and detachment from family memory all formed threads that would be woven into the case against him. On the night of April 5, 2017, Cadell told his mother and sister he wanted to show them a video game he claimed to have developed. His mother, Dr. Jean Padma, came upstairs. Once she sat at the computer, Cadell struck her from behind with an axe, hatchet, fatally wounding her. Later that evening, he struck again, this time his father, Professor Raja, in a similar attack in the same room. After killing his father, he invited his sister to the room, telling her he wanted to show her the game. When she entered, she noticed the bloodstains. He hadn't cleaned them yet. Realizing something was terribly wrong, Caroline tried to escape, but he grabbed a knife and slit her throat. He hid their bodies in a bedroom. He remained in contact with domestic help and neighbors, giving false explanations, telling them the family had gone on a trip. He also purchased cleaning materials, plastic sheets, Dettol, mop, etc., to cover up blood evidence. On April 6th, Cadell's aunt Lalitha, who lived in the ground floor, partially blind, remained oblivious to what had occurred upstairs. She was murdered after he lured her or confronted her. Her body was found dismembered, stuffed in cloth or sacks. In the nights following, Cadell attempted to burn the bodies of his parents and sister in the bathroom to destroy evidence. The fire got out of control. He sustained burns himself in the process. 31 burn injuries were found on him at the time of arrest. He tried to mislead neighbors, attributing the smoke to a kitchen fire or some other accident. But the blaze spread, caught attention, and eventually alerted authorities to something seriously amiss. It was only on April 9th that neighbors, drawn by smoke and unusual silence, alerted police, who entered and discovered the charred bodies of 3 and the dismembered body of the aunt. The crime scene was gruesome. Mutilation, burning, concealment, all signs that the murderer tried hard to cover up. Rather than stay put and wait, Cadell fled the scene. He went to Chennai, stayed in a hotel, kept tabs on news coverage but could not quite escape the digital trace. On April 10th, the railway police in Chennai arrested him. During interrogation, he maintained various contradictory stories. First, the astral projection explanation. Later, rage and family conflicts were invoked. He attempted to feign psychosis, but the investigators were relentless in chasing the digital and forensic evidence. By the time the case reached the courts, the narrative was no longer one of confusion. It was one of planning, motive, and meticulous cover-up. When police entered the house, they found signs of violence and fire damage, blood spatters, discreet chopping stations, plastic sheets, mop, cleaning agents, fuel containers. The bathroom was burnt, one body wrapped in bed sheets in the inner room. Forensic pathologists performed post-mortem. Bullets of cut wounds, chopping, hacking, mutilations, and intense burning. The autopsies revealed multiple injuries per victim. Lalitha had 22 wounds, Caroline 12, Jean Padma 9, and Raja 7 cuts to the head. Investigators collected fragments, charred remains, blood traces, digital evidence from computers, laptops, mobile phones. Cyber forensic teams found he had searched for how to slit throats, how to dismember bodies, tested weapons on dummies. They tied his online searches, purchases of weapons, axe, machete, attempts to simulate murders on dummies, and cleaning supplies to the timeline of the crime. Also, they found evidence that he studied mass murders, adopted techniques, and structured the attacks. In April 10, 2017, Cadell was in a Chennai hotel. The railway police arrested him and brought him back to Kerala. During the arrest, investigators noted burn injuries on his body, likely self-inflicted during the attempts to burn bodies. He was remanded to prison custody at Pujapura Central Jail. In the early days, judicial authorities referred him for psychiatric evaluation. One medical board in 2017 declared him unfit to stand trial due to a diagnosis of schizophrenia. But subsequent evaluations and treatments would revisit and reverse this finding. Investigators and prosecutors began assembling a case that would take years to ripen. Gathering witness statements, forensic reports, psychiatric opinions, digital logs, financial transactions, and survivor testimony from the domestic help neighbors' acquaintances, to form a narrative that could sustain in court. The case progressed slowly. Delays were induced by psychiatric hearings, the COVID-19 pandemic, procedural adjournments. One of the pivotal legal questions: was Cadell legally insane at the time of the crime? Note: having a psychiatric diagnosis, medical insanity, is not the same as legal insanity. The law allows for criminal responsibility if the person understood their act and its wrongfulness, even if they suffered from mental illness. The defense claimed that he was delusional, lacked control, and that the astral projection narrative reflected his dissociative logic. The prosecution responded that his behavior, concealment, adaptation, fleeing, and manipulation were incompatible with someone disconnected from reality. Psychiatric boards and expert witnesses on both sides cross-examined each other's findings. The state stressed that evidence of planning, motive, digital preparation, and his capacity to feign psychosis showed full culpability. Over 41 witnesses took the stand: forensic experts, neighbors, investigating officers, acquaintances, domestic help. The prosecution introduced forensic reports, digital logs, purchase records of weapons and cleaning supplies, the dummies used for experimentation, and the confessions or portions thereof. In cross-examination, the defense tried to challenge the forensic inferences, argue alternative interpretations, highlight possible cognitive impairments, and present psychiatric counter-opinions. They emphasized his alienation, mental stress, and claimed that he did not have full volitional control. The prosecution rebutted by pointing out that the defendant edited his online searches, refined his cover-ups, anticipated police responses, and adapted tactics, signs of a rational, self-aware actor. The defense of mental illness must withstand the weight of evidence of planning, adaptation, concealment, and motive. On the day of final arguments, the prosecution urged the court to accept that this was a case of premeditated murder, not a crime of passion. They demanded maximum punishment, even the death penalty, arguing that the degree of cruelty, planning, and attempt to erase evidence placed the crime in the rarest of rare category. The defense pleaded for leniency, citing the accused's age, alleged mental health issues, and his claim that he did not fully appreciate the wrongfulness of his acts. The court took note. The crime is grave, serious, and numbing to the conscience. The verdict was reserved. The court took time to deliberate the psychiatric evidence, the patterns of concealment, and the trajectory of the accused's rationale. On May 12, 2025, the 6th Additional Sessions Court in Thiruvananthapuram delivered its verdict. Cadell Jeanson Raja was found guilty on all counts, multiple counts of murder, destruction of evidence, and arson. The court rejected the defense's astral projection claim, dismissing it as a concocted narrative to mislead the investigation. The court found that the murders were motivated by rage, family discord, and calculated malice. In May 13, 2025, the court pronounced the sentence life imprisonment, along with fines totaling 15 lakh rupees. The court directed that the fines, particularly amount from sections, be given to Jose Sundaram, prime witness, brother of victim Jean Padma. Importantly, the sentences for arson and destruction of evidence are to run consecutively before the life sentence kicks in. This means that the convict must first serve the fixed-term sentences, totaling 12 years, and then the life term begins. If not remitted by the state government, Cadell could thus spend 25 to 30 years or more in prison. The prosecution expressed partial satisfaction. They had asked for a death sentence, but acknowledged that life imprisonment was a strong outcome. The court emphasized the severity of the crime, the calculated concealment, and the justice owed to the victims. The decision was not taken lightly. The judgment called it a crime that does not deserve leniency. When news broke, Kerala was shocked. A seemingly ordinary household, respectable family, in a quiet part of the city, turned into a scene of mass murder. Media headlines called it the Nanthancode mass murder. For days, newspapers dissected every angle: the parents, the daughter, the aunt, the motive, the failed ambitions, the obsession with the cult, the digital footprint. The narrative of astral projection added a surreal twist. Many questioned how a man could commit such brutality and yet claim mystical motivations. Some editorials opined that the crime underlines a modern malaise. Youth alienated by digital isolation, parental expectations rigidly imposed, mental health ignored, and the glitzy lure of social media driving darker fantasies. The surviving witnesses, the domestic help, neighbors, Jose Sundaram, brother of victim Jean Padma, had to relive the horror in court. Their testimonies, pain, and resilience played a crucial role in securing a verdict. For the community, a sense of betrayal lingered, how a seemingly normal household could hide violence. The trust in family, neighborliness, mental wellness, all took a blow. Cadell remains in prison. The fine awarded to Jose Sundaram is symbolic. Financial compensation cannot erase grief, but acknowledgement of harm is part of remedial justice. We must guard against naivety. Behind closed doors, even well-to-do families can harbor emotional fractures. In an age of screens and isolation, youth may become strangers to their own homes. We must strengthen systems, accessible counseling, mental health support, conflict mediation in families, destigmatization of psychological distress. And finally, justice demands both empathy and accountability. We must recognize suffering, but also uphold the rule of law when lives are taken. The Nanthancode murders weren't about greed or rage. They were about belief, twisted, isolated belief that turned love into death. A son who thought he was opening a door to eternity ended up locking himself in it forever. Because in trying to prove life beyond death, Cadell Jeanson Raja only proved one thing, that when faith loses empathy, humanity burns. This was the story of Cadell Jeanson Raja, the Nanthancode murders. You're watching The Decode. See you in the next episode.